There's been a lot of talk about cancel culture or about unpersoning, and I think that talk is justified, but everyone assumes that it only takes place on the left. We talk about it constantly with leftists cancelling, in many cases their own, but also trying to do the same to conservatives. I've got a special guest today because this is a woman who was cancelled not by the left, but by the supposed right, by supposed conservatives. This guest is Denise McAllister. She's an author, a celebrity ghostwriter, a cultural commentator, and an outspoken Christian. She's currently a contributor at The American Thinker and Gatekeepers Online, but she was formerly a contributor to The Daily Wire, PJ Media, and a senior contributor at The Federalist. She was a commentator at the BBC, NPR, Fox News, Blaze TV, and on Sean Hannity Radio. A lot of these you're very familiar with, but most of those will no longer associate with Denise because of her cancelling. Welcome to the show, Denise.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Thanks.
Always.
So let's go through this. I want to go back to March 2019, because that's when everything really happened, where almost all of the supposed conservative sphere turned against you, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Also a tweet.
Right. So if I'm not mistaken, it began when you criticized The View, which is an awful show, on Twitter, calling it, and I'm just going to quote here because it's awesome. It's a quote, "a round table of delusional mental midgets ricocheting ignorance and lack of emotional regulation," unquote. All right? Okay, go ahead and tell us what happened next.
Well, what happened next was Meghan McCain, who's on The View, got very angry that I sent out this tweet, even though my intent, probably not clarifying it, was that I was responding to her getting into a fight with her co-authors where they were her co-host, where they were criticizing her. And I actually attached an article about her getting in a fight with them about it. Unfortunately, the article had a picture of her. So my tweet looked like I was really talking about her when that wasn't my intent. And the reason why it was not my intent is I know Meghan McCain personally. I'm not friends with her. I'm not close to her, but I was very good friends with her husband, who's the publisher of The Federalist, who is my boss, Ben Domenech. And so after this happened, she responded very, angrily behind the scenes. And I had phone calls saying, "Why did you say this about Meghan?" And I'm like, "I'm not. I'm talking about The View," which I've always done. I'm a provocative cultural commentator. I'm often at odds with The View. And I do think that they are pretty low on the intelligence scale when it comes to their discussion of cultural and political issues. And I do appreciate how Meghan at times challenges them from a more conservative viewpoint. Even though she's not technically conservative, she does bring in that voice to defend, more conservative thinking, which she's crucified for when she does. Well, her response to me on Twitter was, "You were at my wedding, Denise." And that
I remember that. It became like a big thing all over the internet.
It did. It was actually on Jeopardy. It was a question. So anyway, it was it was presented as if I had betrayed her in some way, and it became just kind of a spat. Really, let's just put it down to that. It was really rather silly. It became a spat. And the thing was, I was at her wedding. I attended her wedding. I attended her wedding because of my boss, not because of her. I didn't know her very well. Like I said, I met her twice, I think, before I even went to her wedding. But it came across to the world that I was buddy with Meghan, and I was a bad friend to her and somehow betrayed her.
It's a big betrayal thing.
Yeah, criticizing The View. So it went all silly. What happened, and what this has to do with cancel culture, is that Meghan has a lot of friends in Hollywood. She has a huge homosexual following from Hollywood, a big cabal over there. That's, the group that surrounds her and supports her, where they just deluged on me on Twitter, harassing and coming at me for, going after the Queen. And so that happened all week long. It was just ongoing. By Friday, I had kind of moved past that and was just tweeting about my old anti-feminist kind of things, because I'm an anti-feminist. I often tweet and often did tweet things to poke at the feminist, to make fun of the feminist, to irritate the feminist, and to prove that, women who don't have to fall in line with the feminist kind of thinking in order to be a woman and to be strong. Well, and
I don't want to just cut you off, but I do want to say, I think that's one of the reasons that you were already kind of on the bad side of the left, which includes Hollywood, right? I mean, I think that what actually happened was kind of an excuse. These people were already wanting to get rid of you beforehand, largely for your anti-feminist statements in the past.
Oh, absolutely. Not only that, I was already on the watch list of Media Matters. I was harassed by Think Progress. I was always on their list, because of my anti-feminist stand, also because of my criticism of the LGBT agenda and my Christian views about homosexuality, that it's not a separate sexual identity and that it's a behavior and that it's wrong. And also my criticism of the Black Lives Matter type movement and using white guilt in order to control people and label them as racist when they're not racist. I have been writing about these things for years. The left hated me. So I had a huge target on my back, and everyone on my side knew I had a huge target on my back for these big three identity politics things that I was constantly writing against. So come Friday, I made a joke on my Twitter, which my followers all get. They always love when I do jokes about my husband, saying, "Oh, my husband let me out of the house today. My husband's letting me speak at a conference today." And I made a tweet that, I interrupted my husband during a basketball game. Oh, no, I made a mistake. I better go get him a beer. And, kind of a joke, which they all knew. Well, I got, again, deluged by the same people from earlier in the week who were criticizing me about Meghan, piled on by all the feminists. And I'm talking thousands and thousands of tweets, direct messages. I have an open direct message, which I should have closed at that point. Just harassing, which I'm used to. And that's no problem. I mean, when you put yourself out there in a provocative way, you can't go, "Oh no, I stirred up the anthill. Why are they coming to get me?" You expect that, and I'd been in this business way too long to shy away from that. But when you go after my family, or when you threaten my life, or when you threaten my property, that's when lines have been crossed.
Right.
And that's what happened. So they started to accuse my husband of domestic violence and abusing me, all from this tweet, saying that, he needs to be reported to the police. I actually had emails sent to me saying social services needs to be called, that you are a victim, Denise, that you are a victim of abuse, and he needs to be reported.
Well, if I don't understand it correctly, the main kind of ringleader of this was Yashar Ali. Is that right?
Right. So Yashar Ali, who is a liberal commentator, now I'm even.
He was at the Huffington Post, NBC News, and New York Magazine. But in 2019, the very year this happened, Ali was included in Time Magazine's list of most influential people, in part because of his large Twitter presence and the power that actually gave him in our bizarre modern society.
Yeah, he was called, or I don't know if he still is, the mayor of Twitter. So he kind of sets himself up as kind of the all power of directing the mobs, and making commentary and developing themes. He was there with me with the Meghan spat, harassing me there, kind of dived in on that one. And on this one, he was pushing this narrative through commenting on tweets. You know how you do it, how blue checks do it. They push followers, retweeting, commenting about my husband being abusive, and, kind of this faux feeling sorry for me. Oh, Denise doesn't realize she's such a victim of this misogynistic man who's abusing her. He needs to be reported. And my husband's not in politics. He's a private citizen. He's not like Meghan McCain and her husband, who are both in politics and both in the public eye. My husband is not. And, and to falsely accuse any man of violence and abuse against his wife, simply because I made a joke about interrupting his private game space, is uncalled for. And
it's definitely low. And I do think it seems like more than that, like it's an attempt to create maximum strife in your inner relationship, right? To try and create that inner conflict that goes on. So it seems really low. Like, it's not just, they were contacting police and contacting you and trying to, kind of create maximum pressure from outside sources, which is twisted. But then at the same time, they're trying to create strife between you and your husband to basically destroy you. And that's really the way that I see it. And I think that's twisted.
That's a good observation, because that's one thing that the left loves to do is intercede in interpersonal relationships to isolate people, to disrupt those close relationships of friendships, working relationships, marriages, in order to disrupt their lives and ruin them from within. And yeah, it was wicked no matter how you looked at it. And Yashar Ali was kind of the pushing along this narrative all day and into the evening. And I was becoming, honestly, more and more distressed and more upset about it, given that it was against my husband. And I had already received death threats in the past. I'd had called the FBI on death threats for my anti-feminist views, for my anti-white guilt views. I had had messages sent to my house with recordings that that was going to be raped if I walked outside. I actually had to have a police presence for a while at my house. So this was serious matter to me when I get hundreds of people threatening my family and my husband in my life. And so Yashar Ali was kind of making fun of my heterosexual relationship. People were doing tweets about me and sex, and he was making fun of it. And, so I just started dishing back at him about his homosexual relationship, Okay. And I just said, you're the one mocking it as much as he was mocking me. Again, another spat on Twitter. And finally, I just said, he said again, "Oh, Denise, again, along this narrative, you're such a victim." And I responded to that about his homosexuality. I said, "Oh, so sad, at Yashar, you don't even understand your meaning and purpose as a human male individual, as God's designed you to be," because I am a Christian with that viewpoint. And I said, "Instead, you're trying to find meaning up another man's a-hole, meaning gay sex," which was not nice of me. The language was not good. My point was that his sexual relationship was perverted, yet here he was criticizing mine and trying to bring down my relationship.
I get it. I mean, it is crass, but here's the thing, before we go on, is if you imagine that you're in like a large room with a large gathering of people, and two of those people get into an interpersonal spat like this, where they're hurling insults back and forth, you would expect, or I would, that everybody else in the room would just get uncomfortable, that they would turn away and they would hope and pray that you're not brought into that argument in any way. Nobody says, "Don't you agree?" That perilous thing. But instead, because of the fact that one of your insults mentioned the fact that Yashar Ali is a homosexual, everything changed to make that prerogative, that sort of room, in a sense, turn against you. And I think that's really kind of a dark sign.
Well, I'm like I said, I'm a Christian. I hold to a Christian view about human sexuality, and that we're made male and female to have sex with each other, and anything outside of that is not God's order, and it's sin. And my publishers knew that, my writers knew that, my fellow Twitter followers knew that. I mean, I have a Christian viewpoint, and many of my homosexual followers understand that, and we're clear about that. And so when I said that, and the basic gist of it, that he's not living, I was criticizing the legitimacy of his homosexual relationship from a Christian point of view, said crassly. That was unforgivable in the eyes of political identity politics today. And right. You would expect the left to be angry about it, and they call everyone who disagrees with them a homophobe. I mean, I'm not afraid of any homophobe. I'm homosexual. I have no desire for any harm to come to any homosexual. They have as many rights as we do before the law as human beings. I disagree with their behavior, and I think it's against God's order, and I will state that, and I will continue to state that, because I'm a Christian and I believe the scriptures. And especially to someone who was mocking my marriage and what he was doing and kind of feeding that. And so that what happened from that, I expected fully backlash even to that from the left, because they become insane when you criticize their sacred cows. And but what happened was I got a DM immediately from Ben Shapiro saying, "You will immediately separate from any association with Daily Wire, because I cannot have my brand associated with what you said." And he was also quoted by newspapers afterwards of saying that it was the most heinous thing he'd ever read, written. And this is from a man who has mocked Jesus Christ, who said that the death and the putting him to death was the right thing to do, and described a movie that was going to be a second movie made about his crucifixion was to be called Double Crossed. This is a man who has no respect really for Jesus Christ, even as he will play lip service to Christians who buy his subscriptions and give him money and follow him in his conservative way, because he makes a good argument.
And Ben Shapiro was first, right?
He was the first one. So, and I tried to explain to him on DM on this. I said, Ben, don't you know what's going on? It actually surprised me from someone from the right, saying, I can expect someone from the right saying, hey, you shouldn't have said it that way. Or even if they didn't know the whole context, saying, don't be so harsh, just kind of pull it back a little bit. Yeah. But he said immediately, you will separate from my brand. And I said, Ben, you know how these mobs work. You know how the cancel culture works. You know how they attack and attack and attack. This started with the spat with Megan, but really with my attack against feminists. I said, and you know how this goes. And he said, no, you need to separate. It's all about my brand. And so I went on Twitter and said, Ben Shapiro just let me go, thinking again that conservatives and people on the right would go, this is wrong. Don't you understand that the left is involved in cancel culture and that this is a problem? And thinking that everyone would see this, the full picture of what was going on. No, immediately everyone said, oh, if Ben Shapiro is canceling her, we need to as well. I got a phone call from my boss at the Federalist who, was kind of like, he didn't want to say I'm firing you because it was against Federalist policy to fire anyone for a tweet. So he couldn't come out and say I'm firing you because that would have violated his own policy. So, but he was pressuring, you need to do this. You need to, I don't know really what he wanted. He said he wanted just an apology, but
that's Meghan McCain's husband, correct?
Yes. Okay. So it was a lot of pressure, and I just most of my side of the conversation was also, just stunned that he wasn't defending me and one of his writers who was being attacked by these people in a mob. Yeah. He more than anyone, Ben Shapiro more than anyone, understands how the mob works against conservatives. And I was stunned by it. I was like, how can you sit here and be all mad at me when you should be out there saying you're defending me? But that was unacceptable because I had offended a gay man. And both Ben Shapiro and Ben Domenech are at the heart libertarians. They are not conservatives, and they do not hold to the biblical teaching about homosexuality. And, so as a sexual identity. So I was just flat, and I said, fine, Ben, I'm just going to have to deal with this on my own. The whole deal with the whole mom, and I hung up.
Ben Domenech?
Ben Domenech.
Okay.
And so the next morning I wake up, first of all, to this story plastered across in international headlines that Federalist author has been fired by Ben Shapiro. It was in the UK Daily Mail. It was in a newspaper in Germany. It was in a newspaper in Austria.
This is really interesting to me that the entire basically mainstream media basically adopted this story with various things like, conservative attacked gay man. I saw that, just recently. And then was fired. Yeah, for homophobic tweet, and you hear these kind of buzzwords thrown around. But I think the reason why the media covered it the way that they did was to send a message. I don't think there's any other reason that explains why it made international news, other than that it was to send a message to other, frankly, real conservatives and Christians that they can't speak in this way. That if they do, there is basically no home for them, for want of a better term. That this kind of going against the gay lobby or the gay mafia, if you prefer, isn't acceptable. That there are massive penalties wherever you are, even if you think that you're safe with a job, commentating at PJ Media and the Daily Wire and the Federalist, which is a great position to be in. For any conservative, that would be a place where you'd feel pretty comfortable, talking about conservative viewpoints.
And commenting on Fox News and other places, right? Who also banned me after this. Yes.
I mean, the thing is, what I'm saying is, you were kind of like at the top tier, right? I mean, you've been on Fox News, Sean Hannity's radio, all these different sites that I'm sure that all of my viewers are very familiar with. And yet, all of them, all at once, turned against you, and then the mainstream media celebrated to spread the word. I think that kind of signals a sort of alliance there that took place in order to send a message to other conservatives and other Christians.
Oh, absolutely. You cannot criticize homosexuality or LGBT without getting fired. Now, you can criticize gay marriage politically, and you can have that discussion, but you do not call into question the legitimacy of the homosexual sexual choices, which has now been deemed a whole new identity, of sexuality. You cannot criticize that. And if you do, you will be removed. You will be canceled. And it wasn't, let me clarify, I was not canceled because of the tone of my tweet or the words I used. I used a cuss word. And believe me, Shapiro and Domenech and anyone else are not going to get rid of me because I cussed on Twitter. No, it was about the content of what I wrote. And they said I was dehumanizing Yashar Ali, which they don't realize is what I was saying to Yashar is you're actually dehumanizing yourself by turning away from God's design and choosing your own. So, which is again, standard Christian biblical view, which has been held for all of human history, basically, and, for American history. And, but again, immediately cut off. I was disinvited to a religious liberty conference by America Defending Freedom, the ADF conference for religious liberty, which was ironic. Immediately, they said they couched it by saying, "Oh, we actually wanted a Federalist writer, and now that you're not with the Federalist, you can't come." I know. I mean, let's all we know. So, I woke up the next morning to seeing that my boss from the Federalist, Ben Domenech, had tweeted out, "Denise and I talked. She will no longer be writing with us." That was news to me. So I was like, "Oh, great! Now they fired me."
Yeah. So you found out about your firing through social media.
Yeah, I found out through social media in headlines. Federalist fires homophobic writer. And none of the articles, they just put up my tweet to Yashar's "Oh, Denise" with no context, no understanding. The only one was someone at the New York Post, Eddie Scari, who's gay, who wrote the only explained the whole thing at the New York Post. And he said that I shouldn't have been fired. He goes, I was righteously indignant. And he said, and he understood why. How ironic that it was someone, a more conservative gay person. Another one who completely understood was Milo Yiannopoulos, another gay conservative, who wrote me and said, "This is crazy. I know exactly what happened to you. You're a Christian. Of course you hold that view. Yashar Ali is a big bully. We all know that, and you should never have been fired. And, for your viewpoint and the fact that you were in a Twitter fight with this bully on Twitter." So, it was really stunning. And then over the year, more and more, just no more. I couldn't go on Fox News anymore, no radio. So I completely lost my career, to be honest. And so, that's not me playing victim or whining about. That's just a fact. I have made no money since in 2 years because I lost all of my career. All platforms were gone. I was getting ready to publish a book at that time, and I was in the middle of writing it. And I did call my publisher and say, are you gonna cancel me too? Yeah. And to their credit, at Bombardier Press, which is part of Postal Press, he's like, "Nope, we hire provocative writers. We can't be surprised when they're provocative and cancel them because of that. So we're moving ahead." But sadly, they did publish it, but I haven't been able to promote it because I don't have a platform anymore, and I'm not
right. When you publish a non-fiction book, especially a political book, you tend to make the rounds. That's how you sell the book. You go on Fox and you get these, different interviews with different people, and you promote the book that way. That's, the way that it's done. Without that, you don't have much of an audience, especially when you don't have the place where you used to write. So you've been a controversial writer for some time. Like you said, anti-Black Lives Matter, anti-feminist, and so on. Do you think that it's safe to say then that it's harder to speak out against the gay mafia than most other topics now?
Oh, absolutely. You cannot. Speaking out, it was hard enough speaking out against the feminist, which has been around for years. That's been a kind of a war going on with the feminists, the modern feminists for years, who are real cultural Marxists and are more concerned about equality of conditions than actual equality. It's a very bad philosophy of feminism. It's all part of that intersectionality, umbrella, So, and then of course I was writing very much before Trump got elected, during the campaign, warning conservatives, don't fall for white guilt. Don't run away from the accusation of racism. They're going to call all of us racist. So just stay the course. Do what is right. Don't go running and try to appease these people or try to prove that you're not a racist by giving in to their demands. Just don't do it. This is what I wrote. I said, white guilt, along with Shelby Steele, who's Black, who has written about a book called White Guilt, warning people about the manipulations of these identity groups to guilt people into complying with their political agenda, which is what all this is. The newest one, the newest kid on the block is the LGBT agenda. So what we've seen with feminism, what we've seen with the racial issues is coming in full force with the LGBT. The only difference is, and the one that makes it even more insidious, is that women are an identity group. Being Black is an identity group. But being gay is a behavior. It is not a separate sexual identity. It's a behavior. This makes it on a collision course with religious liberty and with churches and with Christianity itself. So, just try it, any of you. Just try talking to people and say, not I'm against gay marriage, or, I just really disagree with, that behavior. Maybe it's better if they just be gay, but don't act on it. No, say to them, I don't believe that homosexuality is an actual sexual identity. It is feelings, it's affections, it's a state of mind, it's a behavior. It's not a separate identity. You will get backlash even from the right, like you will not believe. But that whole using that as an identity and then guilting people into complying with the agenda of rights that are attached to that new identity is, it's like I said, it is on a collision course with religious liberty. And you will lose your religious liberty to these identity politics power games. And you need to be aware of it. And anyone who opposes it will be canceled. And sadly, it's by the right as well.
Most of my peers who do this, some of whom are friends, are frankly just too cowardly to even broach the topic of it. I think there are indications, lots of them in fact, that homosexuality is actually more of a mental illness than anything. In fact, it's induced by abuse in many cases. And this is something that also we're not allowed to say. And I've said it before on different shows, and I'm not afraid of saying something that is true, but so many people are. See, if somebody actually just disagrees with me, that's fine. But what bothers me is these people who I know agree, but who won't speak publicly about it. And I think that in cases like that, it's why we constantly, as conservatives, are ceding ground constantly. And it's not just on this issue. Like, I know people who won't produce videos about topics like, a white person being attacked by lots of Black people and it not getting media coverage on the basis of those races. They won't cover that because they're afraid of the left calling them racist, like you just said. They just literally won't cover the topic. I'm not asking for anything else but reporting, and they won't do that. So it's like on both the race issue and the homosexuality issue, conservatives are increasingly just the left. Maybe 10 years back, but they're the left.
Well, Rush Limbaugh, years ago, I think he was one of the first ones to kind of do the clarion call about, you're going to be called a racist, bigot, and homophobe. If you go against the identity politics of the day, he warned that. And the problem is conservatives and people on the right did not like being called a racist, bigot, or homophobe, or sexist, or misogynist. And so they gave ground. They either were silent or they actually tried to appease and change their own views or policies. I'm going to elect a woman because then people won't think I'm a misogynist, or I'm going to do this. I'm going to support restitution because so people won't think I'm, a racist, or I'm going to support quotas for gays. Or I'm going to support gay marriage, even if I don't believe in it, even if I think it's wrong, because I don't want people to think I'm a homophobe. This has been happening for years. And the fear of being called these things was certainly legitimate because you were called these things, but there was no power on the left at that time to really do anything to you. It was more a war of words, but it worked because people generally like to be thought of as nice people. They don't want to be that, which is a legitimate need, and desire of people. But you have to know what your enemy is doing. And I think people on the right never quite understood what the enemy was doing. And on the worst side of the things, people on the right actually believed that if you acted these ways, you're a racist, bigot, and homophobe. That's even worse because they bought into the lie. And I've seen that in churches. I've seen that among conservatives who actually believe, if you support Trump, you're a racist. Or, if you believe in, national sovereignty, you're a racist. People on the right will believe that. Or if you have a Christian view about human sexuality, you're a homophobe and you're a threat and you're untouchable and an undesirable, and you need to be shunned and ostracated and not put on any kind of talk shows. So, but what's happened was it was like that for years. But now with the left having gained power in this election, and it really started with Barack Obama, there was an eruption with Trump, but now it's full-fledged, which we all warned about. Now there's actually not only the fear of being called a racist if you say these things, or a bigot or a homophobe, but you will actually lose your jobs. You will actually, be threatened with your life. You will actually be deprived. So there's real consequences attached to standing up for truth. So we've moved from I'm afraid to be called names to I'm really afraid of actually losing my job. It's gonna, this is where.
But that came because of the people who were afraid of being called names. I mean, that's how it started. It's like tyranny used to come at gunpoint, and now they're just people who are afraid of being called, one of these different buzzwords, racist or homophobe or what have you, if you're misogynist, if you're a guy, and all this stuff. And, it's just kind of escalating constantly to the point where now it's not just the mean words. Now it's, we will not only get you fired, but we'll also make sure that you can't get a bank account. That's where we are. Like Gab, the social media site that accepts free speech, they just lost like three bank accounts in America in the last 3 weeks. This is America, and there's no even financial freedom. Like, where does that go? People being left to quite literally starve? Because that's what you're talking about. With no job and no bank account, you're talking about people being unable to purchase groceries. And that's where we're going. And that's tyranny,
Well, and it's frightening that the consequence, the results that it has on people, the psychological toll it takes on the people who've been canceled. I mean, there was a gentleman who worked for UNCW in Wilmington, who was a commentator on Mike Adams, who was called a racist and fired from his job as a professor. He ended up killing himself because he couldn't live with, what happened. And, we criticize that, but that's just the toll. Let me tell you, when you lose your career, and mine was a 30-year career, you lose your career as a journalist, and you can't make money, and you're letting publishers down, and you can't support your family, you can't pay medical bills and all of this kind of thing because you offended one person in a tweet. That's a sense of helplessness and fear that I can't explain to people. Only I think faith, true faith and love of family gets you through it, and determination of will. But, this is why for people on the right to do this and to jump on the canceling bandwagon, is what is particularly dangerous. Because one thing I want to make clear, the left wants to cancel people, but what it really wants is for the right to cancel people. It wants you so afraid of your associations that you won't have anything to do with those people professionally.
It's very Soviet.
Oh, it's very Soviet. It's Lenin, Stalin. They were all these, you put people in groups and you call them guilty by association. This is, the long-term effect of this kind of thing is actually threats against people's lives. Yes. Lumping people into group and silencing them and they're untouchables is a very frightening thing, and people need to be warned about it. And I'm not being conspiratorial or hyperbolic. That's history. That's history.
And I don't think we're that far away from people turning in their neighbors. Heck, you got people doing it now regarding mask wearing and stuff like that. So, I mean, we're basically already there. Yeah.
Well, COVID has been a real testament to what people will do to other people in the name of whatever the government is saying is good and true.
To me, it is, but it's worse than that on a personal level, because it's an indication of how many conservatives don't really care about freedom. That's the thing that's bothered me from the start of it, is how many people, conservatives, a lot of video creators, because I pay more attention to the video creators, obviously, because it's what I do, but how many of them just said, just obey. Like, literally said, just obey or just comply. And I still remember them, and I watch their videos now, and a lot of them have kind of like gone the other way. But I still remember before it was popular, when it was really difficult to say, you know what, freedom matters. Freedom is worth dying for. When there was a time to say that, and I did say that back in the early days of this virus, I was almost standing alone. There were very few people who were willing to say, freedom actually matters. We don't have many shots at this, and America is pretty unique in that we have some freedom. Let's not give it up, to the government and hope that we get those rights back. And, here we are.
Well, one of the tragedies of America and this is that we have now moved from a country who loved liberty and would fight for liberty, die for liberty, to now a society on the whole, and I do believe it's a majority of people who do not love liberty because they love equality of outcomes more. So it was Alexis de Tocqueville in his Democracy of America, written in the early 19th century, who warned America, saying, if you stop putting liberty first above equality of outcomes, not equality before the law, that's not what I'm talking about, quality of outcomes, quality of conditions, you will usher in tyranny. And he said that it will always be the tension in a free republic of it that's individualized based, is this tension between liberty and equality of outcomes. And there are many factors that hold that to intention, religion being one of them, separation of government, mutual affection, lots of different things, strong families. All of those have been broken down. So now we have equality of outcomes as the main concern. And that's what identity politics is. That's what Black Lives Matter wants. That's what the feminists want. That's what LGBT wants. That's what every little group under the banner of intersectionality who see themselves as marginalized, oppressed people, they want equality of outcomes. They want to take from those they see as the oppressors, white men, and women, white women, who they see as the oppressors, and they want to take from them and redistribute it and give it to those they see as marginalized. If you violate liberty in that process, it does not matter to these people because they have put equality of outcomes above liberty. What's sad about that is that all of us who are conservatives, who believe in our founding fathers' documents, who believe in the Constitution, who love liberty and understand that America as a republic is founded for liberty and on liberty, are trying to talk to people and saying, don't you want liberty? Don't you want to be free? And we wonder why people aren't motivated. You get a blank look. Well, the reason why is because they don't love liberty. They love equality of outcomes more. We are willing to die for liberty, aren't we? Right. Yes. But what we need to understand is there is a majority of people in this nation now who will kill for equality of outcomes. That's the difference. Well, I'll die defending my liberty. But, you have people who are willing to, cancel, ruin people's lives, burn down cities, burn down statues, eradicate institutions like the church because it isn't preaching the new order and the new normal of things. Yeah. They will eradicate. This is a destructive revolutionary force that wants to tear down the institutions and values that America is founded on and its religious principles in order to reconstruct a society that is equal. That is tyranny. And we need to realize that that's what's going on. And the fact that people like Ben Shapiro and people at the Federalist, are not holding to this view, understanding and fighting back is appalling. And let me tell you, I know that Ben Shapiro and people at the Federalists and all these other conservative organizations are now on the anti-cancel culture bandwagon. You've seen it. They're like, oh, I'm against cancel culture. Well, they're against cancel culture when it doesn't cost them anything or when it doesn't go against what they see as the new normal. But if it comes against, if you do or say anything that will put them at risk, their brand at risk, their money at risk, their marriages at risk, their personal relationships within media, the political celebrity views, or is going to make people in Hollywood look down on them because that's who they're trying to cozy up to, they will cancel you as well.
I can't imagine trying to cozy up to the people in Hollywood. I'm just going to go ahead and put that out there because, as far as I see, the people in Hollywood are some of the most immoral people in our society, quite literally. And I'm not being exaggerating. I quite literally mean that. They really are. And yet they're creating the media that, destroys our culture over time. But on that topic that you were going, I just want to say that there is a famous quote that said that something to the effect of that a government big enough to give you everything is one big enough to take everything away. And I think that a lot of people forget that when they're seeking that the government come in and redistribute the wealth with its overarching power. It's like if you give it that much power to take everything from everyone and hope that it, fairly distributes, as opposed to what communism has done in every other instance, which is create a small group of all-powerful people, which are the rich and everybody else is poor. It's not going to go well, and it never has.
Well, what Margaret Thatcher famously said, you don't bring people up, through socialism. You bring the people down. You share misery. You spread the misery. You don't elevate people like that. That is not the process. Seeking equality of outcomes will lead to the lowest common denominator. It will reduce human thriving and experience and flourishing down to the bottom. That's where you'll be equal, with elites ruling over you. That's how it happens. It's how it's happened throughout history. And we need, as Americans who are right thinking about this, to wake up and see what is actually going on. And, in these organizations on the right, if they're not consistently defending people on their side against these attacks, even when they don't like it, even when they disagree with it, even if it makes them suffer a little bit, because it costs. It's difficult to defend now. You will lose, advertisers and followers, and people in Hollywood won't like you so much. If you still have the homophobe writing for you, you're not going to have people like you as much. And I hate to say this, but we're going to talk about highfalutin things here, but some of this just comes down to basic human need to be part of the group. I want to sit at the cool kids table. I want to be a part of the in group. I don't want to be isolated. All of which is a legitimate way of human beings acting. We don't like to be the outcast. I don't like to be the nerd sitting there on the steps picking his nose while all the cool kids are over there at the table. So we will sell out even our friends to be a part of the cool group, the group in power. We want to be part of the group in power. And that motivates people even on the right. I mean, this is how you had neighbors. I hate to bring in the Germany example, but it's part of history. This is how you had neighbors turning on neighbors, family turning on family members in, Nazi Germany. This is how you got to that point. And this is how you get the snitch culture. This is how you get the cancel culture. I don't want to be associated with you, so I'm canceling you. It's funny. The Federalist came out a year later to me directly and said, we never fired you. You quit. And that just wasn't true. It makes no sense in anyone's book that I would have quit the night that I was fired from Daily Wire. That would have
I'm done with all my opportunities. Right?
Yeah, exactly. It's just so strange. So it was either a huge misunderstanding or I'm being manipulated. I don't know which, but because these guys know at the Federalist and Daily Wire that the cancel culture is bad and they want to fight it. But boy, they were willing to throw one of their own under the bus because they didn't want to be associated with something so bad as a criticism of a homosexual.
And it's not just you, right? I mean, you're not the only person who has faced the wrath of Conservative Inc. And I think this is important because, Conservative Inc., as we call it, is like essentially the media powerhouse that supports our Republican politicians in many ways, right? To the same degree that CNN and MSNBC are the reason that, the Democrats are who they are because of the press coverage that they get. Well, when you look at the way that our current Conservative Inc. Operates, I mean, they were responsible for people like Milo being cancelled, not from the left, which, he was cancelled from the left way before he was cancelled by the right, but they were responsible for that. Michelle Malkin is another one. Roseanne, I'm not sure how conservative she is, but she was certainly cancelled by the right. That was...
Ben Shapiro supported part of all that.
I think Ben Shapiro was instrumental in all three of these cases as an early mover, you might say, in all the worst ways. Like, I think, if I remember correctly, Roseanne was the one who, she tweeted that Valerie Jarrett was a combination of the Muslim Brotherhood and Planet of the Apes, had a baby or something like that. When, Valerie Jarrett doesn't look black, but apparently is like a quarter black or something, and Roseanne was supposed to somehow know. And because of this, the entire right, or at least most of it, cancelled Roseanne. And it's it was incredible. You look at Valerie Jarrett. Yes, he did. He completely supported that. He supported that at the same time as defending, what's his name, James Gunn, who had all those pedophilic tweets. He did that literally at the same time. Defended the far leftists who had the pedophilic tweets and attacked Roseanne for that one tweet about the frankly white woman, because you look at her and she looks white, so I'm not going to justify the crap. But that's what we're talking about. And this is supposedly who the leaders of conservatism are. I mean, I don't consider them to be leaders, but everybody else does, because they're the public face of conservatism. Even though, as you said earlier, they're in many ways not, because you referred to them as libertarians, because on social issues, they're really not conservative, right?
No. Ben Shapiro more because of his Jewish upbringing, a little bit more on the conservative end of social stuff, but not been dominant at the federal. It's more of definitely more social liberal, and definitely Meghan McCain is socially liberal. And when it comes to issues of sexuality, so no, I think they're all against abortion, but that's neither here nor there when it comes to defining of who you are as social conservatives. You're not going to get canceled now for being against abortion. It's easy.
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, I mean, I just think that's just such an old battle, and an important one. I'm definitely pro-life and fight for the right to life, but it's an old battle. You're not going to be canceled for holding to pro-life issues, but you are going to be canceled for the identity politics issues. Mm-hmm. And because that's about equality of outcomes, that has huge political power behind it. The abortion fight does not as much. This has a lot of money, but as far as the political movements of today and the revolutionary movements of today, that's centered on identity politics. And you have to be careful of people on the right who in any part of it are willing to deviate in order to continue the canceling, because they don't want to be associated with someone who's so maligned by the left that they will put themselves at risk. But where are the heroes? Where are the heroes today? That's what standing up for the truth is loss. And if you're not willing to lose something for doing what's right, what good are you?
I couldn't agree more. I mean, nowadays in our society, everyone looks up to Marvel superheroes because there aren't any real heroes in our society. I mean, that's the reality. They make those movies for adults now to compensate for the fact that we have so few real heroes. It just is the way that it is. And the American church, I think, is part of the problem here, because they don't. And I know I'm being broad, but all of basically the major church denominations are caving in one way or another on these important social issues, like whether it's the homosexuality thing directly, or whether it's even the new trans fad, where it's like, can they even say women are women and men are men? Increasingly, churches will cower out. You would think that in these cases where they've got schools and they're putting, men who claim to be girls into girls' bathrooms, you would think that you'd at least have churches speaking up and saying, well, this is wrong, as a kind of pillar of morality that doesn't change from generation to generation. And we're not seeing that, and at the same time we're seeing the conservative Inc. just caving too.
Well, especially to critical race theory, which is the whole BLM thing. I mean, you're seeing many churches talking more about white guilt than actual guilt before God for violating his laws. We're not saved because of white guilt. Jesus died on the cross for our sins in violation of God's law. We don't care about that. We're going to violate that all day, especially in the realm of sexuality. But boy, we better not even be remotely seem kind of a racist, because we kind of sort of really value national, sovereignty in the global sphere. Somehow that makes you a racist, and we can't be that, and all these white churches, are definitely racist because they're full of white people. Because did you not know, like Oprah said, being white makes you a racist. You may not realize you're a racist, but you're a racist. So you need to embrace your racism and start complying with, the demands of the Black community in order to prove that you are no longer a racist. This is all, and the church falls for this because the church wants to be seen as loving. We don't want to criticize BLM because we want to love people, because there are real racists out there. We want to embrace homosexuality because we want to love these people. They just love each other. It's not us to criticize. It's just all about love. Well, let me tell you that the powers that are using all this to manipulate you, they're not about love at all. It's about hate. And the churches that fall for this are abandoning the gospel of Christ. They're abandoning God's truth. And, the churches and the strength of the churches in early America is what really gave this republic strength about liberty. Yes. It wasn't that America was a Christian nation theocratically by any means, but you can't go away from reading the writings of our founders and know that religion and Christianity and the Judeo-Christian ethic was foundational to liberty.
It was John Adams, our second president, who said famously that our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It's wholly inadequate to the government of any other. And I think that we would do well to remember that today, because as we move away from having essentially a Christian backbone as a nation, the Constitution will get thrown aside because it doesn't match. Because when you have a wholly immoral people, you need a police state. You need tyranny. And I think that's why it's most important for conservatives and Christians to speak up on these social issues, because if we don't, we're headed toward tyranny one way or the other.
Well, and even more philosophically foundational, it's not even just about our behavior, which you're right. I mean, immorality run amok leads to chaos, and you need a great authority to come in and bring order to the chaos, and the state is used for that, and that's a form of tyranny. But the other thing about religion and about true religion, about, the Bible and Christianity, is that is a bulwark of objective truth. That is the tie that binds all of us as individuals together, is the truth that's outside of us that is imposed upon all of us equally. But when you reject objective truth, and everything, your truth becomes your truth, and subjective truth and subjectivism becomes the mainstay of the day about our calling in society, about who we are as individuals. When it's all about subjectivism, it just becomes about power and warring individuals and groups against each other to dominate, to have their truth dominate against others. There are no ties for everyone to step back and go, oh, there's this outward objective truth we all must be aiming for. That's the tie that binds. The Constitution is a tie that binds. But when it becomes, oh, Joe has a truth and Julie has a truth and Kim has a truth, and hey, well, if Kim gets a whole lot of people together who agree with her truth, she can dominate against all these other schmucks who don't have power, and they can become the dominating truth. This is the horror of secular, secularism and subjectivism that's going on in our society that we need to be aware of. And the church seems to be completely oblivious to all of this that's going on.
Well, I hope they're oblivious. The alternative is worse. It's that they're selling out.
That's happening too.
Exactly. It is happening too. They all have, or I should say, most of them have their tax-free status that requires them to be apolitical. And when you really look at it, if you're apolitical, if you're not willing to comment on moral issues of the day, which is politics, then what good are you as a church? You're really not, and that's what you see a lot of. We're not going to comment on this thing. It's like, well, that thing is the moral issue that the church is most needed for. And so many churches just like, we've got our 501c3 status, and that's really gross, I guess you could say.
It's very gross. But I think there's an abuse of the separation of church and state concept,
yes.
Which is, even our early founders didn't like, and there were actually laws against clergy holding a political office. They wanted to keep religion from becoming a dominant political tool to impose upon other people, telling you what you believe and what your church should be. That's what our founders did not want. That's the separation. They never meant that our religion should not inform our consciences, inform our conduct, inform our politics. In fact, it was foundational to it.
Yes.
Again, Alexis de Tocqueville wrote about this. He said, religion is actually the primary fundamental political institution. And by that, he didn't mean a theocracy. He meant that's just the foundation. If you don't understand,
what we start with. Our founders would be completely shocked at this entire idea that we divorced all Christianity from anything in the political sphere and used their words, or tried to, in order to promote this. They'd be aghast. And I know that one of the main things of the founders was that over in Europe you had the Catholic versus Protestant wars, and they didn't want that. They didn't want some kind of overarching government saying this is what Christianity is, whereas you're not real Christians and therefore we're going to get rid of you, and so on. And that's why they didn't basically say Christianity's okay anywhere and spell out a specific religion, even though they were Christian. But anyway, I don't think we should wrap this up without first mentioning that book that you mentioned. You were writing this when all this junk happened, and then you never got a chance. Your book was called What Men Want to Say to Women But Can't?
Yeah, what men want to say to women what men want to say to women but can't. And it is a defense of masculinity in an age where feminism has delegitimized and reconstructed masculinity for the sake of power. And it's left men going, who am I? What can I say? What is my relationship with women? What is my role? You know, what does it mean to be masculine? And on the counter, that what does it mean to be feminine? So it's a book that's written to encourage men, but also for women to read it, to reflect on how feminism has actually impacted their thinking and made them not really appreciate masculinity, which is so important for a balanced society and a free society, and to live according to our design as God has made us, you know, to respect men as men, women as women, and understand what that means and what feminism has done to that relationship and done to men themselves. Because we live in a society, I'm telling you, where men are they actually use the term in psychology to reconstruct their masculinity. There's a whole book called, by the guy who used to be head of the APA, called Reconstructing Masculinity. They want to soften it, feminize it. They use all kinds of excuses of why it needs to happen. And my book is kind of in opposition to that.
Well, that's kind of interesting because I know you get a lot of pushback, at least I do, whenever I say that men make good leaders in society, which I always think is just kind of like obvious that in general, you know, men make better leaders, and most people, men and women, prefer to follow men than they do women. This just is the dynamic. It's the way that we were made. And it seems interesting that the way that the left went to attack you and cancel you as they did was kind of on the same line, right? Because they accused you of having an abusive relationship after you've been talking for years about the correct roles of men and women. I assume that to them the abusive relationship is like normal gender roles. I kind of wonder.
Well, yeah, I mean, all my tweet was I interrupted because I think what my tweet was, my husband's watching a basketball game. I interrupted him. He said, "Woman, you know, you can't interrupt me." And I was like, I messed up. And the point of the tweet was first making, you know, being funny, but also a message to women: respect male space. It's fine if they have their space. You don't need to be invading male space all the time. You know, respect it, you know, have their time. Don't always be, you know, it's all about the woman. It's all about me all the time. And that was my point. But yeah, they hated what I was saying. So they twisted it and mocked it, you know, and then took the extra step of then attacking my husband and taking real life outside of social media steps in order to harm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it's been wonderful having you. I do appreciate you coming on because it was so wrong what happened to you. I just want to go ahead and say that it was so wrong. I've read some of your pieces. You're a fantastic writer. I know you still do some pieces at the American Thinker and Gatekeepers Online, right? Where's the best place for people to kind of follow your work from here?
I mean, you can follow me on Twitter at McAllister Den, but American Thinker is probably the best place where you're going to see not as often as I was writing at Federalist, because I'm working on a couple of projects behind the scenes now, which may or may not ever get published. We'll see. Praying. You know, I have to continue striving and continue working and continue hoping that there will be change. And I am a writer. I'm a political commentator. I am a philosopher of society. I am a theologian as well. So, I mean, it's just, this is my education. So I can't just stop and not do what I've been made to do, whether Ben Shapiro cancels me or not. So I will continue.
Yeah. Well, thank you for standing up. If nobody is going to stand for morality and decency in our society, not the left or the right, we will fall into darkness. And so thanks for fighting for that. All right.
Well, thank you for fighting it. You keep up the good work and, you know, you keep up the good fight. And it just stand strong in the face of the opposition, because it's coming and it's here and you've experienced it. I'm sure you have.
I have. I get some interesting phone calls too. And I'd love to have you on again in the future, because I'm not going to cancel you, not ever.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye. Wait, if you enjoyed that video, please remember to like and share. I can't grow without you. Also, if you want to be reliably notified of new videos, don't forget to subscribe to the newsletter. If you're able to support the production of these videos, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe at Subscribestar, or maybe get one of the healthier products, or even get some merch.